Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Devin Haney of Being Complainy, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday, the 22nd of April. And there wasn't a UFC Apex event this weekend. The warehouse had 10 fewer people in it than it does most weeks. So I don't expect a lot of people in, but then I don't expect a lot of people in with these Apex cards a lot of the time. So we're going to talk about Ryan Garcia beating Devin Haney in one of the weirdest fights in a while, and in boxing, that is. And we're going to talk about PFL and how that's going, because I caught up on a couple of their events. And then maybe we'll hit a question. I don't know. We'll play it by ear. We're doing an informal podcast today, like the Boycast. If I find myself talking about Tekken 8 for 5 or 10 minutes, that'll happen. Though that's not actually likely. I've sort of lost my patience with it this week. I need to try that Dragon's Dogma, but everyone says that it's the same as the previous one and not that good. I was excited for that Thingy Ronin one, but sadly that was not well received either. Could go back and do some Fallout New Vegas or something like that, because the Fallout TV shows had crazy success. And everyone's like, Walton Goggins, are you just learning about him now? He was amazing in The Righteous Gemstones or whatever. And no one's talking about The Shield, where Walton Goggins was that like his debut? Because he was a powerhouse on that show. That show was fantastic. And no one ever talks about The Shield anymore. But anyway, fights. Last weekend, I think the weirdest thing and probably the biggest story was Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. I was publicly saying, I'm not going to watch this shite, because Ryan Garcia was clearly losing his mind in the lead up to it. His family tried to have him sectioned. He was just a complete mess at all times. He was like, this is the thing, people... I said this beforehand. I said, I don't want to watch some guy whose family tried to section him, fight for a world title, when he was already fifth in one set of rankings. You know how Devin Haney only has one belt currently. So he only has to deal with the 10 people that... Hang on. Do you know what? I'm going to go check what belt it was. WBC. So he's got the WBC World Super Lightweight Championship, which is the same as the World Junior Welterweight Championship. It just depends on which board of dickheads your belt belongs to. But Ryan Garcia, damn, he was at 6th and now they got him at 7th. He's gone down by winning. But he was the 6th in line in the WBC rankings. So there's 3 other world champions. Barroso has an interim world championship. So you could say there's 4 other world champions in that division that Devin Haney could fight. There's also like his mandatory challenger in the WBC rankings, Sandor Martin, or even any of the guys who's above Ryan Garcia. But he chose to fight Ryan Garcia because Ryan Garcia has some eyes on him because he's annoying. But Ryan Garcia was doing like TikToks to 200 viewers, just ranting in the middle of the night. Most people had decided that he's probably gone crazy. And there was this like, well, maybe he's crazy like a fox. Maybe it's an act. Similar to Muhammad Ali before the Sonny Liston fight, just act crazy and throw him off and draw a ton of attention to the fight. But then having won the fight, he was like, oh, you all fell for it. And also I'm drinking every day. It's like, so you are an alcoholic mess and taking tons of cocaine, but you also won. It was a seriously weird fight. Devin Haney is sort of a hit and miss fighter. Sometimes he turns up and he looks phenomenal, and other times he turns up and he looks okay. These two had actually met as amateurs like 6 times previously, and I watched one of them. And one of the remarkable things was like neither of them seemed that special in the one that I watched. I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, just kids boxing. But Haney was undefeated as a professional, and Ryan Garcia had previously been undefeated as a professional until he ran into Gervonta Davis, who battered him and knocked him out with a body shot in round 7. But that was where people thought, like, in boxing, people put a cap on your ability the moment you run up against someone who beats you. Even though almost every fighter's career has shown this to be false. Most people lose at some point and then learn from it and move on, or they fight someone different and it's a different matchup. But Haney and Gervonta Davis, obviously very different fighters. Gervonta Davis, southpaw, midget, enormous banger. Devin Haney, orthodox, jabber, jab and grab, loves clinching. There's that fantastic still from one of his fights where where they pop up the stats and it says 17 clinches initiated by Haney in this fight, and it's like round 6. And you're like, what the fuck? Wait, there's a rule against this. It's one of the grey rules of boxing, as we always talk about. Clinching is especially one of them, but it is against the rules, and no one, the most they feel comfortable doing is warning you for it. No one ever gets a point taken for excessive clinching. Or it's very, very rare. You will have seen it, but it's like guys who don't matter in fights that don't matter. If a big fight happens and there's a lot of clinching, it's going to be ignored. And it is part of boxing in terms of the technical side of boxing, but it is also a foul. And I believe the wording in the rules is like excessive clinching. And excessive clinching, that's entirely subjective. Kenny Bayless is terrified of letting two guys' chests touch, so he immediately breaks them, but he lets them do it over and over again, so it's a free reset. If you're that terrified of the clinch, you should be like, okay, you've initiated 5 clinches now, I'm taking a point, or I'm threatening to take a point. You're getting a hard warning, mate. Hard warning is my favourite thing in all of combat sports, because the hard warning comes when, like, the second point deduction should have come. All right, you've low-blowed him 20, 30 times, but now I'm really serious. You're getting a point taken if you do it again. And at that point, the fighter's like, all right, I can stop punching his balls for a bit. I've used them as a speed bag through the first 4 rounds. But Haney, not a huge puncher with his other weapons. He's got knockouts on the record because he outclasses people and then he knocks them down. But 15 KOs in 32 fights. Ryan Garcia, 20 KOs in 25 fights or 26 fights. Obviously known as the much bigger puncher. Garcia, you would say, had the raw attributes. I mean, that's the thing that everyone gets from looking at him. He's very, very fast. If you watch, I mean, the left hook is what we're going to be talking about primarily today. He throws it off an almost straight arm with the thumb up as like a slap, and he still gets a ton of speed and a ton of power on it. It is not how you teach anyone to throw a left hook if you could, or if you were trying to teach someone to throw a left hook well. Oh, the other thing, of course, that counters the notion that maybe Ryan Garcia was faking in this fight is that he missed weight by like 3 pounds. So he doesn't win a world title from it. And he had to pay Devin Haney a load of money, like $1.5 million, I think he took out of his purse to pay Devin Haney. As someone pointed out to me on Twitter, actually a couple of people pointed out, more than the entire purse of a UFC card he had to pay Devin Haney as like a penalty. So I think, you can still be... This is the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Like, the difference between an elite fighter and, like, a regular person or someone who gets themselves to a good level through hard work and determination and getting everything right. Great athletes can still perform while the wheels are absolutely falling off in everything else in their life. There are so many fighters. I mean, just off the top of my head, like Nigel Benn and Ricky Hatton, both great examples. So many fighters who are banging rails of cocaine, even during training camp, full-on addiction, and they're still winning fights. And often in interviews, you're like, oh, he looked well. So to look this bad is not a great sign for Ryan Garcia, as in the interviews, but he is a good enough, physically, athletically, he's a good enough fighter that he can carry it off. Whether it lasts is the interesting question, because someone like Bernard Hopkins, his whole thing was that he never changed his partying or eating habits, even outside of camp. He had a very boring monastic life. And he was able to go into his mid-40s. And he was at this card, and they showed Mike Tyson in the crowd, people went mental. They showed Evander Holyfield in the crowd, people went mental, which was an interesting one. Then they showed Bernard Hopkins, and nobody's, just crickets. Poor old B-Hop. And, isn't he a part owner of, or he's part involved in Golden Boy Promotions? Oscar De La Hoya looked incredibly fatigued this week. Anyway, on to the fight. Devin Haney was like, all I have to worry about is that left hook. And he said it, and he obviously meant it, because, man, he was spooked as hell by that left hook. Ryan Garcia standing really upright, which is another thing that makes his left hook really weird. Standing really upright, chin up in the air, or head over the air, and he's poking out his lead hand as a jab that clearly he doesn't want to land, because he's holding his left shoulder back so far that the jab's coming nowhere close to Haney's face. It's like, please reach and parry this so I can throw the left hook around the side. But early on, he lands this wide left hook around the side, and Devin Haney goes down, and everyone went, oh, well, that's that left hook we were talking about. And then for the first 4 or 5 rounds, aside from that left hook, nothing happened for Ryan Garcia. He didn't throw... the punch, the CompuBox stats are hilarious for this fight. And the whole fight was hilarious, because even though Garcia pulled the upset and everyone was, it was very exciting, They did both look pretty bad in this fight. It was like schoolboy fighting at several points. But total punches, Garcia lands 2 in the second round to Haney's 14, 6 in the third round, 5 in the fourth round. It's only in like round 6 he picks it up and he hurts Haney, and every round after that he lands double digits. But not a high output fight, and certainly not for Ryan Garcia, and certainly not in those early rounds. But one of the little changes that I really liked was that, you know, he had to contend with this idea of being a one-trick pony with the left hook, and he did it by coming out, and I think it was round 6 he came out and he throws a 1-2 right down the pipe, and he does a 1-2, steps off to the right and a right uppercut, and he throws a 1-2 again, and then he goes 1 and a big wide 3, and he knocks Haney down again. Or it at least hurts him. And it's like, yeah, you know, you can say someone's left hook is the one that you've got to be worried about, but that doesn't mean that the rest of their game doesn't matter at all. Even if you're left-handed and orthodox, your right hand's in the back, it's got distance to throw, you've got your legs, you can get into it. You know, all he had to do was go out there and show it. And after he started showing it, things got a lot better for him. Haney was holding like crazy, and the referee absolutely saved him in this fight. The referee was letting him hold for long periods and then telling Garcia off for trying to push off and hit him. And then, like, Garcia's trying to push off and hit him, and the ref, like, stops the fight and goes, hey, I'm warning you. And you can see the clock's time ticking down. You can see Haney's recovering. And you're going, yeah, I can see why there's all these accusations of corruption in boxing. I liked Ryan Garcia using the uppercut. The left uppercut, he only threw a few times, and it actually caused Haney a lot of problems. But he was throwing these uppercuts to try and catch Haney ducking forward, looking for the clinch, because Haney was getting so desperate. He wasn't even like throwing his own punches to get into the clinch. He was just reaching. And it was another one of those fights where it's like, if Ryan Garcia had practiced breaking clinches or posting his head underneath Haney's jaw and banging the body, he could have kept that working. He could have kept the fight going. It is the massive blind point in all of modern boxing. There's almost no one actually knows how to prevent a clinch and keep their hands free to hit. But even then, he just by pushing away with his hands, he was able to chin Haney midway out of a clinch with his arms extended underneath Ryan's arms and knocked him down. Were there 3 knockdowns in this fight or 4? I mean, he hurt him a good few times. But then, you know, we've got to talk about like the Ryan Garcia shoulder roll and all that bollocks too. He brought this out, I think it was his last fight. Hold on. Yeah, Oscar Duarte, who was not super highly regarded. He won that fight, he knocked him out in the 8th, but he brought it out in that fight and it looked weird. And he brought it out in this fight and it looked weird. The shoulder roll. And it really like highlighted the point that, because Devin Haney's pretty decent at getting down behind his lead shoulder. And, you know, I talk about this a lot with open stance stuff and kicking into the open side, kicking into the closed side. I say that, like, if you're attacking the closed side, the side that the opponent's got forward, they can get down behind their shoulder even with, like, cowering ducking. But with the shoulder roll stuff, like, there is a fine balance. And if you watch someone like a Floyd Mayweather or an Archie Moore, there's an effort to stay sort of upright. And they will duck things. They'll duck down, but they'll immediately try and reclaim their posture. Not only because it makes it easier to punch if you're standing in a good stance and relatively upright, because you're coming, you know, your counter is your backhand, your right straight coming as quick as possible, and that's a lot easier if you're in like a good upright stance. Upright is in like standing upright, not like upright like I'm talking about Ryan Garcia having his head way up in the air. But if you do get caught leaning, like there were loads of moments in this fight where Devin Haney just put his left glove on the side of Ryan Garcia's head as Ryan Garcia was trying to shoulder roll and leaning backwards and bending over. And he just kept him there. Because as soon as your head goes behind your center of gravity and your feet aren't moving, you just push him back like that. And then he's hitting him with like 4 or 5 right hands to the kidney, which is always a grey area because in the shoulder roll, you are presenting like illegal targets to your opponent's right hand, basically. You're going like, all the good stuff's on my left side. If you hit me on my right side, that should be illegal. And most referees will say, well, you can punch the body on the right side because they're not giving you anything else to hit. So Canelo was hitting Floyd Mayweather with these big wide rights to the kidney, which is technically an illegal punch, but the ref and Floyd Mayweather was complaining about it being illegal, but the referee was allowing him to, and it was basically understood that it is legal within this context. I always remember Champ Thomas saying that, like, if someone tries to hit you with a right hook to the kidney around your stonewall, as he called it, but I'm going to say it, Philly shell, just you got to try and spike their fist with your elbow. But the other thing about, like, this performance in particular and Ryan Garcia's attempt at the shoulder roll is that it showed just how active your right hand needs to be when you're shoulder rolling, or your rear hand when you're shoulder rolling, because that's, as we always say, on the open side, your reactions and your rear hand are all that protect you. If you watch Floyd Mayweather against, like, Miguel Cotto, who's going jab, left hook, left hook, jab, and constantly trying to draw that hand out of position, Floyd Mayweather is on it. He's there going, okay, parry, block inside, parry, block inside, parry, left hook to the body, elbow down, jab to the body, don't even bother reaching for it. Whereas this fight, like, Devin Haney's going, right, 3 left hooks to the body, lovely. Or he'll throw, like, 2 left hooks to the body while Ryan Garcia's in the quote-unquote Philly shell, and then come up with a left hook to the head, and it'll just clatter through Ryan Garcia's guard. There's so much fine point. Like, it's like if you're driving, as you Americans say, stick, as we British people say, driving. You know, it's like how your left foot's operating the clutch and you've got that fine point control there, but your right foot's operating the brake and you've got that fine control there, and they're different. And then if you try left foot braking once every couple of years, which I used to do when I was younger, it was a very stupid thing to do. Try left foot braking once and you'll almost put yourself through the fucking windscreen, because your left foot is not used to doing that level of pressure in that task. And that's what your rear hand is doing when you're shoulder rolling. It's got a lot of stuff to do in a very subtle, small movements, but it's got to do them precisely and firmly and strongly. Because if you start dropping your right elbow to deal with the left hook to the body and then they come upstairs again and your hand's in the way, but it just gets smacked straight into your head, that's as good as just getting hit in the head. So he's got a lot of work to do, I'm saying, if he wants to get that if he wants to get that shoulder roll working. But here's the thing about shoulder rolling. It isn't the same as just standing there and trying to take multiple blows. Good shoulder rolling is done out of any stance, any kind of style, and you get down behind your shoulder and you come back with the punches of your own. You don't have to stand there like Floyd Mayweather trying to take 8 or 9 shots and poke your tongue out of the guy. Side note, commentators for this fight, Rod and Todd Grisham. Todd Grisham, the worst commentator in the world, constantly being booked by, like, B-tier combat sports. And then the guy with him, who I don't know their name, but he sounds like Frank Shamrock, when Frank Shamrock used to commentate on Strikeforce, and he had beef with, like, half the fighters around his own weight, even when he wasn't really fighting anymore. So he'd be there, like, Jake Shields gets clipped once in the course of winning a fight dominantly, and Frank Shamrock's going, his chin's gone, he's got no chin at all, it's made of glass. Like, you're going, it's round 4, Frank, he got hurt in round 1 and he's been dominating ever since. And Frank Shamrock's just going off about how Jake Shields will be knocked down by a strong gust of wind. Having said that, Frank Shamrock does deserve to be in the UFC Hall of Fame, and he's off doing whatever he's doing, movie producing, while Jake Shields is running a let's look at some of these photos from the death camps seminar on Twitter. But Ryan Garcia gets the win. Someone tried to save Devin Haney with a majority decision, but the other two managed to get it roughly right. Yeah, 114, 110, 115, 109, and 112, 112. You got to do some work there, especially with knockdowns, to try and save Devin Haney. But because of the massive weight miss, Ryan Garcia wasn't eligible to win the WBC super lightweight title. But I don't think Haney loses it, because that would have been really funny if it went to vacant. I said give it to Subriel Matias, because he's my boy, but the whole thing was a circus. It was very, very silly. I am glad it turned out the way it did, though, because, it was a stupid fight to begin with. Devin Haney just trying to get Ryan Garcia's clout when there were many more, at least in the rankings, deserving challengers. And, of course, there's 4 belt holders, so book a bloody unification with someone. Does raise questions about Devin Haney going up in weight, because, of course, he didn't have a ton of power lower down. But then Ryan Garcia came up in weight for this too. He's already fought Gervonta Davis at lightweight. So the other question this week is PFL good yet? Answer, sort of. Everything about their production is awful. The constant need to mention the smart cage, the stat, and just all the innovations that they've brought that aren't actually innovations. The overwhelming feeling you get when you're watching PFL is this is really corny. I wish they'd stop all of this. There's stuff about the UFC that's annoying, but it doesn't get in the way too much of the fights. I think all the stats on the screen is one that really annoys me because it doesn't help you. The UFC flash up like total strikes, maybe every couple of rounds. And that works. It's not, they don't do it too intrusively. In the PFL, constantly, since PFL 1, as in PFL Season 1, that's another thing, how they number their events, really annoying. But constantly there is almost the bottom third of the screen is full of nonsense. And it's changed from season to season what they put down there. But they've got strikes, kicks, record. So strikes and kicks are changing. Record stays the same. You're like, I don't need to know their record all the way through the fight. I don't even need to know how they're doing in the tournament all the way through the fight. Every other sport in the world, they tell you at the start what the standings are, and then you're expected to remember. They do this thing if there's a knockout in the first round where they go, quick six, and it flashes up quick six along the bottom of the screen, and you're going, it's not going to happen. Stop trying to make it happen. Because you get 6 points for a first round finish. But honestly, even watching these events back to back, I didn't remember. The tournament format over such a short period with so many fights means that they banned elbows, which is also annoying. The quick turnaround means that you, often it's... I mean, this is just tournaments generally, but often the best guy doesn't win because he's injured. And if you suffer a cut in a fight, that also might affect your chances of going on in the tournament, even if you win. I think the time that they try and cram the tournament into is kind of absurd because you've got to fight every few weeks. Whereas they could do, over the course of a year, a tournament and have the fighters fight every 3 months or whatever. But, next week they've got the light heavyweights and flyweights coming round again, which is 3 weeks after the last time they fought. They've got the women's flyweights and the men's heavyweights. Which is another annoying thing about it because, PFL... They call them PFL 1, PFL 2, PFL 3 of the season. So last week was PFL 3. PFL 1, 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, whatever, 3 weeks ago, women's flyweight and heavyweight, which was dreadful. But then you know that in 3 weeks, you've got to watch them again. Because that's how the schedules match up. Whereas PFL 2 was lightweights and light heavyweights, and that was great fun. And PFL 3 was welterweights and featherweights, and that was also great fun. So let's talk about some of the interesting stuff from those two cards. PFL 2 had Clay Collard versus Patricky Pitbull. Patricky, the worst Pitbull, but apparently the pre-fight hype package, which I didn't watch, because I will never, ever watch any material between the closing bell of one fight and the opening bell of the next one. But apparently they mixed up the two Pitbulls. They were advertising the two-weight world champion, actually really one of the best fighters in the world, Pitbull. And they got his dog shit brother. His brother is a former Bellator lightweight champion by merit of Patricio winning it and then sitting on it and saying, I will vacate it and go back to featherweight if you give it to my brother or if you let my brother fight Peter Queally for it, which is basically giving him it. Even though I think Queally won the first one, which is even funnier. But this was Clay Collard doing Clay Collard things. He got dinged a couple of times by Pitbull, who's going to throw a hard right hand whenever he can. And then he just overwhelmed him with volume. I mean, it was early in round 2, and people complained about the stoppage, but Patricky was gassing out his arse, and we were 1.5 minutes into round 2. That's how well Collard works the body up and down. He was throwing body shots. He was landing calf kicks, thigh kicks. He was just taking it out of Pitbull and then getting dinged in the head occasionally. And, getting hit in the head doesn't really stay with you in the same way that getting your body minced up will. It was a classic Clay Collard fight. There were loads of cool little combinations you could steal. But one I really liked was he used the 2-1, which we always talk about, throwing the right hand to get close to the opponent, putting it on their guard, and then shooting a jab so that it goes all the way through their head and snaps their head back. You get yourself too close, and then you throw your jab. the Sergey Kovalev special, but he did that into a low kick or a calf kick, and he did it a couple of times, and every time he would pop Patricki's head back and kick the leg with no check. Also in the lightweights, Mads Burnell, shocking loss against Michael Dufort. Burnell doing his usual thing where he covers up with elbows and things and throws at a really accurate percentage, but not enough. They showed the strike stats, and it was incredible because Michael Dufort had thrown like 120 strikes and landed 50, and Mads Burnell had thrown 45 strikes and landed 40. And you're like, you're still getting outlanded, even if you're working at amazing accuracy. Mads Burnell's always frustrating, doesn't really do enough. Good calf kicks, though. But he got dinged, and Dufort managed to get the guillotine on him, which is really surprising because Mads Burnell is Mr. Front Headlocks. So eyes on Dufort, he looked pretty good. I didn't watch Brent Primus get a submission over Bruno Miranda, but he deserves some respect because he beat Mansour Barnoui in the tournament, and then he lost to Usman Nurmagomedov by decision, but Usman got caught taking drugs. And the whole circus around that has been that it was overturned, and they said, well, we'll book the rematch, of course. And then they decided they didn't want the rematch. So Mike Hogan was like, well, what Usman took didn't matter. And then people were like, well, what did Usman take? And he didn't say. And the no contest stands, so he did, on the record, cheat. But yeah, poor old Brent Primus got robbed of his rematch there. So I'm glad he got a win. Second round win, so 5 points. Not a quick six. Co-main was Rob Wilkinson, Tom Breeze. I thought that was an interesting matchup. Rob Wilco has been great. He got a really rough run in the UFC because he debuted against the debuting Israel Adesanya. Oh, no, sorry, he fought Sayar first and lost by knockout, and then he got debuting Israel Adesanya. So 2 fights in the UFC, 2 losses. Goes away, kickboxes and boxes through the pandemic, comes back to PFL, smashes everyone. Tested positive tested for massively elevated testosterone to testosterone ratio, like almost everyone in PFL did. I don't know why they're bothering to test them. So he won his million, but he might have had to give it back. But against Tom Breeze, he just smashed him out of here. It was incredible because Tom Breeze is a decent fighter. Went out of the UFC basically because he got injured lots and missed a load of time. Haven't seen anyone smash him as quick as Rob Wilkinson did here. And then main event, Impa Kasanganay versus Alex Polizzi. Alex Polizzi took Yoel Romero to the 3rd round, losing in the last second of the fight. It went the decision with Carl Moore, who just challenged for the Bellator title. Impa Kasanganay gets him out of there in 1. There was really interesting stuff in this fight because Impa Kasanganay is mixing in takedowns really well now. And he threw Polizzi to the floor, and Polizzi gets up and reaches back around the leg and tries to sidewalk slam him. And he kept doing this. He kept reaching backwards from the turtle, grabbing the leg. Craig Jones has instructional with large portions on this, but he'd roll under and try and attack the leg. It was really interesting, but he got caught in the end basically trying to do that while he was hurt because he was trying to recover. He was trying to kill some time without getting hit in the head, and he ended up getting stuck and smashed. And then PFL 3, which was this weekend just gone, some really cool stuff on that. I really liked Brett Johns versus Timur Khizriev. Khizriev is undefeated. He was 14-0 coming into this. Not a big finisher, 4 finishes, 11 decisions. But he's fighting out of Dagestan, so you know what to expect. And I thought Brett Johns gave a great account of himself here. Brett Johns is too small to be a featherweight, but he's fighting at featherweight because PFL won't open a bantamweight class. Unbelievable. One of the talent-richest divisions in MMA, even outside the UFC. They could get a banging tournament going there. Just cut the women's flyweight, or cut the women's lightweight now that you don't have Kayla Harrison, but they won't do it. So guys like Brett Johns are forced to compete at featherweight. But Brett Johns here gets taken down by the powerful Dagestani, and his work along the fence was sensational. He freed his legs, he'd get the cross grip, and every time he'd be able to stand up off that cross grip. And then he'd take down Khizriev. Now, he lost the decision, and I think that was fair, but he looked really good in the process. I like Brett Johns a lot. He doesn't really have a threat striking, which sort of hurt him here against Khizriev, because the way that he was able to get up, if he was a banger, he could really get Khizriev in trouble, or at least scare him. Borix versus Enrique Barzola was good fun. Borix really beat him up. If you want to watch a striking clinic against a good wrestler, that's a good fight to watch. Gota Yamauchi and Naaman Gracie was dull. Naaman Gracie was the most, aside from Crone, he was the most recent, a Gracie who can finally carry the Gracie tradition into modern MMA. And I'm sorry, the Gracie tradition was that they were the people training ground fighting, and nobody else was really doing that much of it. Like, that was it. It was a knowledge check in the early days of MMA. And now, like, you got guys who can do it all. And Damon Gracie did try and develop a decent striking game, but like he went 8-0, beating Ed Ruth by rear naked choke, met Rory McDonald, who was still a shadow of himself even at that point, lost by decision. And then since meeting Rory McDonald, he's gone like 3-5. Couple of guys to keep an eye on from this card. Murad Ramazanov, who'd fought in one championship quite a bit. In fact, he beat Kadestam, who was a champion there at one point. And his most recent fight before this was a no contest against Roberto Soldic. But because one won't actually offer people fights anymore, he's in PFL. He fought Staropoli, who was in the UFC for a while. And he manhandled him, just threw him all around, got on his back, choked him. Very impressive guy. The guy who fought Logan Storley, Shamil Musayev, Russian but not Dagestani, from Moscow region. And one of those guys from like a Sanshao background, or Wushu, or Kung Fu, whatever you want to call it. You know, similar to Muslim Salikov, the king of Kung Fu. And he's going backwards around the cage. He's trying to stop Logan Storley from just bum rushing in and taking him down. Lands a great spinning back kick on the spot, like we were talking about last week with Max Holloway, jumping on the spot. Wins Logan Storley and just beats him up for much of the first round. Second round, times a beautiful uppercut and finishes him in under 30 seconds. Really impressive stuff. To have that fun Sanshao striking game and the flashy takedowns and kicks out in the open, and to be able to fight with your back against the fence is really, it's a good combination. Big fan of any Sanshao guys. Double big fan of Russian Sanshao guys who aren't from Dagestan. And your main event was Magomed Umelatov versus Koreshkov. Koreshkov, obviously, Bellator champion at one time. Very funny because in the first round, like, we're very lucky that nobody watches PFL, because otherwise the rubber guard nerds would be back at it. It used to be that 10th Planet guys were convinced rubber guard was the future of MMA, because it's a clinching guard, it's on the ground, you work inside the strikes, you get the overhooks, you walk your legs up, they can't strike you while you're doing it, you can work into omoplatas and stuff. And Andrei Koreshkov literally gets taken down by Umelatov in the first round and gets to the omoplata doing rubber guard bullshit. Rest of the fight wasn't as in Koreshkov's favour, but he's an old man now. And Umelatov's on the up. Oh, the fun one was Brendan Loughnane versus Pedro Carvalho. Loughnane, another one. See, this is the thing. There's so many interesting stories here because people think of PFL as like UFC dropouts or whatever, and it just isn't. Like, there's lots of guys like Tom Breeze in the co-main. He was in the UFC. He wasn't bad in the UFC. He just got injured. He just had a bad run of injuries, and then opted out of his contract. Don Madge is another one. He had a great knockout. He had a great performance against Brendan Ward, choked him out in round one, and now leads the table in that division. South African guy, was in the UFC. Everyone was really excited because he's a really good striker. Head kicked Tay Edwards in 2018 in his UFC debut. Decision for Fares Ziam in his next fight, like a year later to the day almost. But then he'd cancelled the fight against David Tamer before he turned up in the UFC. He cancelled 4 fights, 2 against Guram Katataladze, 1 against Nasrat Hakparast, 1 against Magomed Mustayev. All fun fights there, actually. 4 cancelled fights in the space of almost 3 years. So basically they just said, yeah, we can't really, there's no value to either of us in this relationship. So he went to PFL and had a couple of fights last year. And he looked really good in his first fight of this year. But Brendan Loughnane is another one. He's had great success in PFL. I think he won the tournament in, was it 2022? Yeah, he beat Bubba Jenkins in the final, but he won the $1 million. And then he got a fight with Marlon Moraes. He was on like a 5-fight knockout loss streak, and he got an easy knockout there. But then he surprisingly lost to Jesus Pineda in PFL last year. Smartly took the rest of the season off because he got knocked out. And he has $1 million, so he has the luxury to do that. But he came back against Pedro Carvalho, who we talked about before. Very funny guy out of Straight Blast Gym Island. You know, like all SBGI guys, it's like, what's your strength? Because it's, if it's grappling, you don't really have the wrestling to get there, and your striking isn't really great either. But he's very aggressive, and it has actually worked against some good fighters. He beat Mads Bennell and Daniel Weidschel. But he also just walks on to counter punches quite a lot. So when he got a title shot against Patricio Pitbull, that was the most overmatched I've seen anyone against Pitbull. Pitbull just, every time he touched him, he fell down like a wacky inflatable arm man. But he was already on a 2-fight losing streak in Bellator before he came into this. He fought Brendan Loughnane. He's actually doing a decent job. He's throwing kicks on the open side. He's landing them on the body and the arm. Then Brendan Loughnane catches one, drops it down, and punches him with, like, the force of 1,000 suns. And Carvalho goes down. But then Carvalho's getting up, and the ref, like, he grabs an ankle and starts on a takedown, and the ref stops it when he does that. As in, he had Loughnane going backwards. He wasn't just, like, clinging on to a leg on his, on his belly. There were a couple of bad ones, actually, because when Clay Collard stopped Patricky Pitbull, it was the referee stepped in just as Pitbull hit him with a counter left hook. Some really bad stoppages in these, but they've probably been told, if you have a tournament going on, I'd err on the side of caution. So is PFL good yet? It's all right. You should check it out. It's got some good, you are going to see good fighters. Don Madge was great. I mean, this new guy, Thad Jean, demolished a dude with an uppercut in 2 minutes, and he's undefeated and he looks pretty interesting. There's all these Russians that they're bringing in. You see about an even number of undefeated Russians and Dagestanis in Bellator and the UFC, or as in like debuting in Bellator and the UFC. So they must be offering about even or making better offers to some. I don't think the tournament like structure is sustainable. Or conducive to people enjoying it. And I think changing the night of the week that they're on so often doesn't help. And just about everything else about the product. But the fights are good. And Shamil Musayev, he was a treat. Brendan Loughnane is a treat. Did I say what happened with him in the UFC? He lost on the Ultimate Fighter, and he lost his first fight in the UFC way back in 2012. He's been around forever. But then his record since then has been absolutely sterling. But anyway, all I'm saying is, give PFL a chance. So we got a real nerdy UFC coming up this weekend, plus some other stuff. But the UFC fight night is Matheus Nicolau versus Alex Perez. Nicolau I like, but is very hit and miss. Actually, I always sort of enjoy his fights on a nerdy, not doing enough, but I quite like the little bits you're doing level. And Alex Perez, who actually looked really good against Mikhaev in his last one, despite having a really bad run of luck in the last few years. You got some other weird shit on there, but it's not terrible. Hey, you got JSP, Jonathan Pierce versus David Anama. Oh, it's the unathletic cage wrestlers. They're going at it. Haney Yaya versus Victor Henry on the undercard. What the fuck? The return of Austin Hubbard. Don'Tale Mays versus Caio Machado. Absolute creator fighter heavyweight there. But we got stuff on, and we'll be getting into the weeds on that on the Boycast. I'm going to have a good watch through some of Nicolau and Perez's fights, and Tim Means is back. Yeah, it's decent. It's passable. It's not as terrible as people say, but it's got absolutely zero name value. We got Ryzen 46, which has the weirdest main event I've ever seen. And we got some boxing and kickboxing. So we've got tons to talk about, and we'll be getting into it on the Boycast. If you listen today, well done you for turning up when there was no UFC event. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslagpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. And if you want to get in on all my extra stuff, get on the Patreon, you slag. I'm your boy Jack Slack, intending to win the Pulitzer by writing a long-form article about the time that Garrett Armfield and Grant Dawson dated the same girl for 3 months, and neither knew. Bless.